Oh hi! I'm a Marvel zombie from way back, and primarily a Spider-Man fan. At home, I have a good 8 or 9 of these boxes, and so I'd scrounge through them so that I could find the Spider-Verse. There is a new film being released into theaters, an animated feature-length film on Spider-Man, all to do with this comic book series. So let's go to our usual spot and discuss how the adaptation does. This is the first full-length animated feature starring Spider-Man to be released into theaters, and that's a big deal. The Spider-Verse storyline in the comics, like most of Marvel's big events, has numerous crossovers, prologues, and simultaneous miniseries. However, I'm only going to focus on the main storyline that happened in the pages of the Amazing Spider-Man comic book and how it compares to this new movie. Spoiler alert, not very much. Before we get into describing the comic storyline, there is 2 bits of backstory I need to cover, and hopefully, if you're a non-nerd, your eyes don't start to glaze over. But I'm gonna warn you, this gets very comic booky. First is Earth 616. No, this is not an entire planet filled with people from central Michigan, the thought of which makes my throat fill with vomit. That's an area code joke that not many people will get. I know my brand, and I know it well. Earth 616 is a designation that comic book writers gave to the main storylines of the majority of Marvel superheroes. Spider-Man, the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, and everyone else you're most likely familiar with is from that main storyline, even if they don't bump into each other on a regular basis. However, new writers coming aboard didn't necessarily want to be bogged down in the history of those characters or cause huge inconsistencies with the tales they wanted to tell. So there was this concept of creating a multiverse. This originally showed up in the 1980s in the Captain Britain comic book series. Each member of the Captain Britain Corps is from a different reality. It was discovered that the main Marvel universe was taking place on Earth 616, a completely random number to underscore that there wasn't some mystical importance to that Earth. It was one amongst thousands. What this eventually did was make it so that the writers could create new comic book lines like Marvel Noir, Earth 90214, or Marvel Zombies, Earth 2149, or in the 2000s when they refreshed a bunch of their heroes into a line called Marvel Ultimate, Earth 1610. The Unlimited line of comics was meant to remove the baggage of decades of stories and return superheroes back to the very start of their origins. They could reinvent these heroes and in some cases completely change aspects of characters that had been consistent since their inception. In the case of Spider-Man, it was given to a writer, Brian Michael Bendis, who started the story with Peter Parker the way that we all remember, but would eventually, and shockingly, kill off Peter Parker to be replaced by Miles Morales. So that brings us to bit number 2. Miles Morales was this character of Afro-Latino heritage with fairly similar powers to Peter Parker, although with a few additions. While there was a small outcry at the time that this was simply a publicity stunt to make it appear that Spider-Man had been killed, Miles has grown to be a hugely popular fan favorite, to such a degree that, through some plot contrivances, he is now in the main Earth 616 universe, or at least he was the last time I read a Spider-Man comic book. Now, getting to the Spider-Verse storyline, this happened right after a real publicity stunt, in my opinion, in that the real Peter Parker in Earth 616 was sorta killed off. Otto Octavius, better known as Dr. Octopus, had been dying from cancer for years, but he concocted this plan to steal Spider-Man's body, so he was able to put his consciousness into Spider-Man and proclaim himself to be the superior Spider-Man, which is what the comic book changed its name to for about a year. Then, as I was always certain it would, things changed. Peter was able to fight back and regain control of his body, and this Dr. Octopus would actually die. It was a little convoluted and confusing. But at the end, we got the Spider-Verse storyline. This character of Morlun had been seen in short epilogues in the Spider-Man comics, hunting the different Spider-Man from the different universes in order to inhale their life essence. Or what I like to call a second date, am I right, guys? No. Alright. Anyway, envision a cosmic transdimensional vampire. Did you think of Tilda Swinton too? The comic series is mainly written by Dan Slott with a bunch of different artists. It starts as if we are following our normal Peter Parker, only for him to die at the hands of Morlun. This we find out quickly is not the real Spider-Man, but the hero of Earth 449. Our actual Peter Parker is alerted to what is going on by Silk because, for lack of a better term, she senses a disturbance in the Force. Silk is a relatively new character who is bitten by the same spider that Peter Parker was. They have this animal magnetism that draws them to each other, and, to put it in terms of the good place, has them fork like bunnies. Soon, they are joined by Spider-Woman, Spider-Girl, both from Earth 616, but also Spider-Man 2099, and Spider-Ham. Oh, everybody loves that Spider-Ham. especially if it's glazed. It's revealed that Morlun is part of this family who for centuries has been chasing the spiders from all the multiverses and draining them of their life essence because of a prophecy. Of course, those dumb, stupid prophecies that never actually come true. There is a web of the universe being looked after by the Master Weaver, telling the family what to do next. We see glimpses of the other universes. This cosmic family is truly depraved. They call themselves the Inheritors and refer to the spiders as food and gleefully kill them for sport. The spiders find themselves in a safe zone, which feels tenuous at best, but it's here where the true theme of this storyline seems to come out. Because of reasons, and that this is a comic book, our Peter is confronted with the superior Spider-Man, the one that was taken over by Dr. Octopus. They fight because of many reasons, but primarily because the superior version wants to try and kill the entire family. Peter ultimately wins the battle and states quite plainly, "We've already seen the Inheritors can't be killed. Killing's not the answer. It never is. We need to be better. And that's why I'm in charge." Death is all around them. On one world, it's Gwen Stacy, the character who Spider-Man famously accidentally killed early in his crime-fighting days. He has a hard time having her go into danger, believing he is still ultimately responsible for her safety. I should mention, this is when Spider-Gwen, who is also a very popular character, was introduced. It was in this storyline. But I think the really cool thing is that they start to really play with the different versions of Spider-Man. There's a point where they enter the 1960s cartoon version, and there's a pivotal moment when Leopardon appears. This was the giant robot that the Japanese Spider-Man TV show used, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that the comics have claimed that the show is canon. The Inheritors eventually claim the three people they need, the other, a clone of Spider-Man, the bride, who is Silk, and the Scion, Peter Parker's infant grandson, on one of the worlds. Because this is a superhero comic, we know that the heroes will eventually prevail, although this time in a subverted way. In a weird plan, they switched the Scion, that was the baby, with Spider-Ham, which causes much anger, but then in the heat of battle, the superior Spider-Man outright kills the Weaver. Peter is pissed. That wasn't part of the plan. That was never an option. We're heroes, damn it, and heroes don't kill. The prophecy is ruined. They exile the Inheritors onto a planet filled with radiation where they are only safe in a single building, which I'm sure means just like James Bond or that weird rash, they will return. There's so much stuff that goes on that you probably do need to get all the other surrounding comics besides this main story to fully make sense of it. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that type of storytelling, or at least not in this execution. I believe that the main line should at the very least give me all the information I need and not make me feel lost. The overall message seems to be to turn the other cheek, that even with ferocious enemies hell-bent on killing you, you need to be the one who shows what true heroism is. And I agree with that. That's why I love Spider-Man, but I feel this same idea has been executed much better in other stories, especially in the short storyline entitled No One Dies from a few years before. Spider-Man has always been a combination of fantasy and science fiction, I get that, but I also think Spider-Man stories are best when they stay located in New York. Spider-Man is what's known as a street-level hero, the guy who gets the woman's purse back after a robber steals it, and he fights supervillains at the same time. There are so many stories to tell of a regular guy who is given extraordinary responsibility. When it gets into the cosmic and away from that central idea, I tend to lose interest. But that's just me. Overall, I enjoy seeing the multiverse of Spider-Man, but I think I'd rather read the miniseries of each of those individual characters, at least the more interesting ones. The movie that's playing right now was written by Phil Lord, who is also responsible for scripting the Lego Movie and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's directed by a group of people, Bob Perichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. If you've seen the trailers, then this won't be a shock to you, but this film is very much a Miles Morales origin story. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler coming up if you haven't seen the movie yet. The Peter Parker of this film is killed off in the first 10 minutes. Miles takes up that mantle after being bit by a spider. And now, he's juggling a bunch of different balls. This new girl in the school called Gwen, his father writing him to do better in his studies, his uncle is a petty criminal that he loves but feels guilty visiting, and he's trying to figure out all these new powers. The Kingpin, a character you might be familiar with from the Netflix show Daredevil, is the antagonist. He's this master criminal of New York. He's a huge, hulking man with immense power. He is dealing with a personal loss and is searching for the solution to that by opening up portals to different worlds. This is causing havoc in the real world. This is what brings in a few different versions of Spider-Man, namely Spider B. Parker, a version of Spider-Man who has recently divorced his wife, has become increasingly depressed, and has gotten just a little bit fat. There's also Spider-Gwen, Spider-Noir, Penny Parker with her robot, and Spider-Ham! I mean, come on, of all the different versions, there's no way you could leave him out, right? This is what I need to say about this movie. I was anticipating at least liking it. I did not expect to love it. This is the most fully realized version of Spider-Man ever. Even though, yes, Miles is the main character and it's his emotional arc that we're most concerned with, the references and tone all fit the Spider-Man books I loved while growing up. So while there are no reality-hopping bloodsuckers in this film, it turns into a story about a young man finding his calling by realizing that being a hero is more than being super, which, yes, is not some unique worldview, but the execution of that idea is exemplary. There are real stakes in this movie. People die. There's real menace behind the ruthlessness of the Kingpin. But Miles is so beholden to expectations and to what other people have done, whether that's his father or Spider-Man. Make fun of me if you want, but I had a tear when he's told by Peter, "One thing I know for sure, don't do it like me. Do it like you." And they wouldn't have been planning this, but the fact that Stan Lee's cameo begins with the phrase, "I'm gonna miss him," seems to be especially poignant with his recent passing. I'm about to contradict myself, at least sort of. I mentioned in the comics I tend not to like the cosmic universe stories, but even though this edges into that territory, because the storytelling focuses so much on the individual and not all the pseudoscience that goes into transdimensional travel, I was swept away. If I care about the character and their journey, I can forgive a lot of things. I know my biases well. I'm a sucker for coming-of-age films, which this falls into. Miles is a 16-year-old coming to grips with his newfound power. He's trying to figure out how to do the right thing. The adults in his life are supportive but can't quite understand how to help. By the end, we see how both sides have helped each other discover new aspects of themselves. I am remaining spoiler-free very specifically because I really want people to go and check this out because it deserves it. This, for me, is a home run for Sony Animation. Now, can Disney do some knockout animation as well? And what I hope this signals is that much like how the comics for decades have been able to handle different stories because of their different dimensions or Earths, that the movie universe can do the same thing. I'd love either animated or live action films that tell a single story that don't have to worry about the overarching narrative in the main storyline. A boy can dream, at least. Or so I'm told. I'm an old man. Each of the Spider-Man that they featured, I'd want to watch in their own film. I think they picked the exact right characters. There's strictly comedic, there's dark and grizzled, and there's anime inspired. I want to see all of those films. I will say as a criticism that the animation was both something that I liked and didn't like at the same time. They were trying to emulate comic book pages, at least sometimes. So if you've ever held like an old comic book up close to your face, you know that you see those little dots. But in this film, while they emulate that, it makes me think I was supposed to have 3D glasses on occasionally, but this wasn't a 3D film. I think that's going to throw off a lot of people. But there's also these little flourishes of onomatopoeia where you see knock 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 happen when someone is knocking on the door, or thwip coming out when someone's web is shot out. Let's go to the similarities. Obviously, the entire idea of a multiverse is there in both stories. The death of a Spider-Man starts off the main conflict. There are multiple versions of Spider-Man that come together to fight the antagonist, and both understand the importance and the fun of Spider-Ham. For the difference is basically everything else. In the comics, this is a Peter Parker story. In the movie, it's a Miles Morales story. Instead of a transdimensional family of vampires, it's a single man, the Kingpin, who causes harm. But fundamentally, even though they share a name, these have very little to do with one another. So which is better? I would say, hands down, it's the film. I felt the emotional impact much more, and by reducing the amount of Spider-Man to 6 instead of hundreds, there was a better feeling of camaraderie amongst the team. It's also a lot funnier. John Mulaney as Spider-Ham is just such perfect casting, and Nicolas Cage as Spider-Noir is just a riot. The only thing I wish the film could have also accomplished is the importance of Spider-Women. This is something the comic does constantly. They all play an integral part, not just in the emotional stakes, but also in the final battle. Fingers crossed for that sequel? What did you like better? Are you a comics fan? Do you mind having a film focus on Miles Morales instead of Peter Parker? Let me know all your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with me, in the comments below. I personally can't wait for more. I hope they make a sequel to this, or make spin-offs with some of the other characters being the main character. Next time we talk, it'll be about Mary Poppins. Grab your umbrellas and gird your loins. Have a great day.